Thank you for agreeing to have a chat with me, John. As you know, I do really admire the work that you do, particularly in and around how you explain to people to break down the misconceptions, to get to the truth. So could you explain how people can do that, particularly around the current referendum?
I guess the thing I'd like to start with, Lara, is something that you taught me, and that is how you tell your story as a First Nations person. It's interesting when someone says to someone else, so what's your story? Often they'll start with their job, which is sort of code for maybe their income level, their education level, a whole lot of assumptions around what a person's job might be and what that means. But the way you have taught me about telling your story is something quite different. Could you, rather than me say it, could you just run through that, because that's really, really central to this whole campaign.
Oh, absolutely, and we use that in our training that we're doing around the referendum too. But it's a cultural thing. In our culture, it's about building relationships with people, and to do that we need to find where our commonalities are. Like, where is a person from? Am I connected in that way? Am I related, or have I been on that country? So it is a process of just building a relationship. So it's normally, who are you? Where are you from? Who are your parents? What do you do? And from that, you get to learn about a person. You get to learn their story. And then you're able to share your story, because you can relate to something that they've shared with you. And that actually is the foundation of a relationship. And that gives you an opportunity then to build on that relationship. And it's sustainable. Like, it's not an acquaintance or someone that you've just met once before. You actually do start to form bonds with people.
And that to me nails it. That's what this campaign is about. When we're having conversations with people, it's not about perfection, it's about connection. And the way we tell our story to each other, to ourselves, is everything. And really, that's what the referendum is about. The people on the no side are basically telling the lie that by First Nations peoples telling their story and having a voice officially, structurally, to tell that story, that somehow it's going to erase the white people's stories. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it's the opposite, because First Nations people's stories have been erased.
Yeah.
But not from your hearts.
No, absolutely.
And this is all about having a structure whereby First Nations people's voices can be heard and the stories told to enrich all of us. And so if we can't tell our own story when we're having a conversation with someone, then there's something missing straight away. If we're obsessed with technical details, sometimes we can miss that deeper reality, that deeper connection of how is my story going to relate to the story of the person I'm trying to have a dialogue with, and maybe trying to explain why they should vote yes in this referendum. So, some people might say, well, is this the right place to start? And it reminds me of the story, when someone asks someone directions to a certain town, and the other person says, well, I wouldn't start from here. Well, where else are we going to start from?
Yeah.
And as I said, this isn't about perfection, it's about connection. It's about sharing our stories with each other. It's about really wearing our hearts on our sleeve rather than having something up our sleeve. and that's why it's a very beautiful thing. The fact that it's the Uluru Statement from the heart. Well, we shouldn't be afraid to bare our hearts in having the conversations with people about why this is important to us, why this means something to me.
To the lobby.
This way.
I really like that, because if you have a look at our history and our traditions and our song lines, this is something that we can share with the whole nation. Our culture is very much about oral histories, and it's a beautiful culture, and we are asking people to embrace that culture. No one is going to lose anything through recognising us in the Constitution, but they're going to gain, the oldest living continuous culture in the world. And it is a beautiful culture.
Oh, and how much poorer are we as a nation if we turn our backs on this oldest continuing culture on the planet? There's room in this place for more than one story.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And by saying no to the wonderful diversity, the plurality of beautiful stories of your people, it just beggars belief that we would want to shut those voices down. There's that beautiful line from the Indian writer and activist Arundhati Roy when she says, "There's no such thing as the voiceless. There's only the deliberately silenced and the preferably unheard." Well, voice is, a voice to Parliament is all about ensuring that First Nations peoples are not deliberately silenced or preferably unheard. And when we have the conversations with people, I think it's really useful to. I know often we're time limited. We have to make use of what we've got. We've got to work with what we've got. But wherever we can, to try and elicit people's stories and try and form that connection between the fact that their story is important to them and the stories of the First Nations peoples are equally important. And that one doesn't cancel out the other. But colonisation is all about cancellation of the First Nations people's stories. And
it was Craig yesterday. With Craig, Craig would go up to the table to the head of the drinks. Where are you going there? Where's that there?
Voice doesn't undo all of the violence that has been done. It would be foolish to claim that this is going to fix everything in one go. But it is a place to start, and we've got to do whatever we can to turn around this ongoing violence and dispossession and displacement, this disempowerment of people. And Marsha Langton, I thought, put it very well when she said, people's lives improve when they have a say.
Absolutely.
And that goes for everyone. And that, again, is a really good way to establish a connection with whoever we're speaking with. That, it'd be very hard for someone to disagree with that point. That, if you put to someone, well, would you prefer to have a say over decisions that are going to affect your life? and I would be I'd be very surprised if anyone said no. And that's really at bottom what all this is about. It's extremely simple.
Absolutely.
It's so simple.
And as unionists, we know this, right? So if we look at unionised workplaces and ununionised workplaces, when we have members at the table, we get better outcomes. We get higher pay, safer workplace, better workers' conditions. And this is just what we're asking for, a seat at the table. What we've seen over, centuries is we have been excluded. Like the Constitution was written purposely to exclude us from the Constitution. And we've had these kind of blanket policies that one size fits all, and it just does not work because each community is different and there's different issues that matter to them. So if we had a seat at the table, we could share this knowledge. We have our own medicines and we have our own processes that could be contributed, to policies to prevent some of the issues that we do have. So just having a seat at the table could make a difference. Like you said, when people have a say over things that impact their lives, you get better results. And we've never had that before. The reason why we are asking Australians to vote in a referendum and enshrine it in a constitution is so it's never taken away from us again. Because we have seen time and time again, representative bodies are defunded and they disappear when there's a change of government, or they're targeted and they just kind of disappear. At least this way, there always has to be some form of a voice for us. And you know what? Maybe one government will water it down. But as long as it's there, we have the capacity to lobby, we have the power to influence and can present our thoughts and share our skills and knowledge.
And in a way, the utter disaster that was the Northern Territory intervention typifies what happens when there is no structured voice. It's a matter of deciding what's going to be done to and for First Nations peoples, instead of First Nations peoples deciding what they need to do, what you need, And so, again, it's a very simple principle, that things work better when people have a say. And really, isn't that the heart of democracy? Isn't that what democracy means? And if we call ourselves a democracy, can we not find it in our hearts to broaden and deepen our democracy by saying yes to a voice to the people who are the oldest continuing culture on the planet, and who, as the Uluru Statement says, are also proportionally the most incarcerated people on the planet? I mean, if our heart is not broken by this reality, there is something very wrong with us. And if our hearts cannot be moved to say yes to something that even as a modest start can turn that around, then what are we? What are we as a nation?
Yeah.
And how can we claim to call ourselves democratic in our spirit? And all of the ideas of egalitarianism and mateship and all of those values that many people that we will be talking to espouse, how can they mean anything if we can't say yes to this very simple proposition? And for me, the bottom line is, this is what the representatives of First Nations peoples asked for.
Yeah.
As a non-Indigenous person, I have no right to say, well, I actually know better. I know what's best for you. That to me is the most, disrespectful attitude. And yet that has been the norm. That was the Northern Territory intervention. That was the stolen generations. Non-Indigenous people deciding we know best. We know what's better for you. and that is the most demeaning and dehumanising way to treat anyone.
Yeah.
And that's all this is. It's just about sharing a sense of common humanity together. And I find, as a non-Indigenous person, I'm a migrant. You know, I wasn't even born in this country. I came here when I was 7 years old. My parents are Maltese. I migrated here from England, and I grew up on Darug country. And you know, much to my shame, I didn't know that I was living on Darug country. And that to me is disrespect. You know, the word respect comes from, it literally means to look back again. It means it's sort of like giving someone a second look, you know, looking and taking the time to look at someone, to take notice of someone. And I didn't. You know, as a child growing up in Darug country, I was disrespectful.
But you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, even when I went to school, like, I was learning about Captain Cook, I learned about the First Fleet, and I learnt about how the British civilised the savage natives. Like, now, I know that's not true, so I was disengaged with school, become more of a social scene as opposed to an academic one. And this is some of the stuff that a voice could actually bring, is breaking down the misconceptions and the lies that have been taught in this country, so people can understand and know what has happened, and some of the disadvantage that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people do face, and the implications and why the issues are so broad now because of that generational trauma that's been passed down. You know, it's not a one size fits all. But what we're asking is not anything grand. It's not anything different either. There are other committees that advise government on a whole range of issues, like whether it be the Resource Council in and around mining, or whether it be, you know, around disabilities. Like, there are other committees that do this. You know, the difference is we will get to elect who we want on that committee, and there will be like provisions there to make sure that remote communities have that direct line into government as well, because we know that the issues are very different in remote communities as opposed to an urban setting. So what we're asking Australians to vote on is not really a big ask. It's quite simple and small, but means the world to us. And I think it's a step forward for a more united nation, and I think there'll be a lot of other minority groups in this country that are looking, that feel a little bit on the outside as well, that will also feel a bit more united if this gets up.
There are three things I'd like to pick up from, you know, you've opened such a rich vein there, Lara. First thing I'd like to pick up on what you've just said is you spoke about school curriculum, basically when both of us were growing up, and I learned exactly the same things. And isn't that just about who gets to tell the story?
Yep.
You know, it's, you know, everyone knows that, and you know, you can put this to someone that you're talking to. Who has the right to tell the story? Are you going to tell your story the best, or is someone else going to tell your story better than you? And everyone knows that only you can really tell your story. And the school curriculum of those days is testimony to the fact that First Nations people's stories were not being told, that it was the white story about colonisation, which was a lie, you know, a patent lie. And we know that when we, you know, if as an individual I'm living a lie, it has a toxic effect on my body and my soul. And as a nation, if we're living a lie, same thing.
Yeah.
It has a toxic effect on all of us. And so, you know, you put that very beautifully, that this will unite us. And in a sense, yes, it will bring healing too in the long run if our hearts are in it. The second point I want to make is, you know, you spoke about the fact that, yes, we have so many advisory committees, you know, it's just not a big deal. Why should it be a big deal that we have something absolutely embedded so that it can't be removed for First Nations to have that voice to Parliament. And I think of the enormous power, for instance, of corporate Australia has a very powerful voice to Parliament. It might not be in the Constitution, but it's in reality.